What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, February 15th, 2017, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Kaahumanu Friday and another weekend of just increasing insanity all over the world with all this nonsense going on. It just feels like utter chaos. Of course, that's the design intent by those who are pushing for the New World Order. They want as much chaos as possible to try and bring what they're doing into reality. All right, so we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. So let's get right on to it. We are seeing an outright war being declared by the entrenched political elites against the populist upstart president, Donald Trump. And it's almost like they're not even bothering to try and hide the fact that they are collectively giving the finger not only to the President of the United States of America, but to the American people who voted for him. And they're basically flashing this red warning sign. You know, you can stop pretending that you live in a democracy, because you don't. Because all of your rulers are supposed to be selected from within the little club that they all belong to. So I'm not the only person who's looking at this story coming out of Matrix Bob. Conspiracy in Washington to destroy Trump's inner circle. Top Republican claims Flynn was the first. They want to basically they're literally on attack against the administration. We are seeing two of the branches of government attacking the third branch in sort of an abstracted way. We're already at a civil war. Now, Donald Trump is basically starting to fight back, and he has to. He has to start taking the initiative again. And he's launching a war on these NSA and FBI leakers who are illegally giving classified information to reporters who then take that material, turn it around, spin it, and use it to attack Donald Trump. And it is shameful behavior. Forget all those movies you ever saw about how the FBI are a swell bunch of people and, you know, the spies are always heroes and James Bond. They're not like that. They're not like that. And getting on back to the holdovers in the White House, Barack Obama's folks working under Trump are being blasted for causing chaos inside the White House. And again, this gets back to my concern about Trump and his dangerous degree of naivete. Now, he comes from the world of business, where one's primary loyalty by default lies with the boss that signs the paycheck. Now, obviously, Washington, D.C. politics is something else, where one's loyalties are often hidden from view, directed by ideology, or owed favors, or, in this alarming number of cases, coerced by compromising information. Blackmail is a very common system of control inside the Federal Reserve. And Trump is not prepared for it. He's prepared for people who keep promises, because that's what he did in the world of business. And the time for expressing dismay with tweets is now over. Trump needs to regain the initiative by acting decisively. He has enemies working against him inside the White House itself, and they have to be removed or reassigned if he's going to have a chance of actually starting to do the job he promised the American people he would do. Now, Donald Trump is out there basically taking on the corporate media again. The fake news media is going crazy with their conspiracy theories and blind hatred. He's specifically wagging his finger at MSNBC and CNN. And it's kind of ironic to see the corporate media who are doing this to Donald Trump, and then they get their knickers in a twist because Sean Spicer is taking questions from the lesser media in the back of the room. The smaller media outlets are getting the first questions. That's just not done. Yes, we're trying to destroy you, but the rules are you will give us the information first. Now, the New York Slimes came out with this story yesterday claiming anonymous aides on President Donald Trump's campaign had contacted Russian intelligence, citing classified information supplied by 4 current and former American officials. Again, it's the anonymous, unnameable sources. And even the New York Slimes is having to admit these officials are saying there's no actual evidence that the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians. There isn't really a story. And by the way, this is a recycled story. They ran this back during the actual campaign where they were talking about, oh, there's a computer Trump owns and it's talking to a computer in Russia. Well, Trump's business interests have business connections in Russia. Up until Vladimir Putin took direct control of Russia's central bank, we were all friends and buddies, and there was a lot of business going on between the United States and Russia, and Trump was part of it. Of course they're going to be making phone calls. Of course their computers are going to be reconciling accounts. It's not a big deal. And by the way, do you remember when Bill Clinton earned $500,000 from a Russian bank for a single speech? And Flynn has had to resign over a single phone call? That tells you right there the liberal bias in that corporate media. And I'm not the only one who's pointed out this is basically a recycled story from a while ago. Story out of dailycaller.com. Journalists go nuts over rehashed New York Times story. And again, they'll come out with sensational headlines and all these allegations, and down at the bottom of the article where they're hoping people won't bother to read is where they say there isn't actually really any evidence about this, but there's a lot of smoke and we're going to report on that. I'm sure that Trump was communicating with people inside Russia, including the Russian government. It's a necessary aspect of doing business. And let us not forget, all this brouhaha about contact with Russia took place during the transition. Doesn't it make sense that members of the president's transition team are going to be opening up the channels of communication the president is going to need to be using following the inauguration? They're trying to make a mountain out of a molehill here. All right, we're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And I have a little bit of an announcement. I need a favor from all of you. If there's anybody listening to this show that has hard, factual evidence regarding Snapchat's facial recognition feature, drop me an email today. Now, I don't want speculation or guesswork or, gee, it may be this or maybe that. I'm looking for some hard data on Snapchat, its facial recognition feature, and what it might be used for. So just email me that, and thanks an awful lot in advance for that. Now, the GOP intelligence chairman is saying that the FBI did not actually have a warrant to record Michael Flynn's telephone calls. So, again, we've got these intelligence agencies are acting outside the law to get what they want. We need to start seeing some arrests get made. Now, remember the New York Slimes went with this article that was posting quotes from a Twitter account claimed to be that of General Flynn, and it turned out later it was a fraudulent Twitter account, was taken down. The New York Slimes deleted all of that from its online version of the story. But Nancy Pelosi is still out there using these fake quotes from the fake General Flynn Twitter account. She's just hoping you don't know it was all a lie. Oh, I saw it in the New York Times. It must be true. Now, General Flynn's resignation letter had a lot of information in there. Needless to say, he strongly rebuked the liberal media for basically glaring mischaracterizations of what was going on. And Flynn says his calls with the Russian ambassador were standard practice in any transition of this magnitude, and apparently Trump had actually told Flynn to start opening up chains of communication. Now, the liberal media is out there still suggesting the communications violated the Logan Act. The FBI and the Justice Department officials insist it's wrong. And they are correct on that point. You can talk about any policy you want with anybody that you want. The Logan Act is violated only if you take concrete action or make some kind of a deal as a private citizen. Obviously, being in the transition is a bit of a gray area. But most important is no deals were struck, there was no quid pro quo, there was no actual action. It was simply talking about what's going on. And the liberal media just went on the warpath. And by the way, a little bit of a side issue. Apparently, U.S. Spy masters were recording Tony Blair's phone calls for years on end. It is amazing here. All right. Trump's nomination for Labor Secretary Andrew Puzder has, in fact, stepped down, withdrawn his name from consideration. Apparently, there was a lot of friction even within the Republicans for his support, so they're going to have to come up with somebody there. We're still in that confirmation courtship period, and once it's all over and done with, I'm looking to see some significant changes in how Donald Trump is operating, because he's still having to woo the Senate, especially the Warhawks, to get what he wants. Now, comedian Eddie Griffin, on one of his presentations, literally called out for Donald Trump's assassination. He was apparently doing a show down in Dallas, and he was talking about, you know, how Dallas took out Kennedy, and now you got to take out Donald Trump. And, Eddie, we're not laughing, but I imagine the United States Secret Service are probably paying attention to what you're doing. And I want to make a point here. The First Amendment right to freedom of speech is actually clarified further on in the First Amendment. The right to gather peaceably and petition the government for redress of grievances. That tells you that free speech is peaceful, and you are presenting your concerns to the government and asking for a correction. Freedom of speech does not mean you can shout fire in a crowded movie theater if there is no fire. Freedom of speech does not mean you can call for the assassination of our leaders. Freedom of speech does not mean you can walk into the middle of a road, block traffic, smash windshields. Now, getting on over to France, the polls are showing right now Marine Le Pen is the only French presidential candidate who is now guaranteed a place in the final round. They have a multiple-tiered series of elections, and Marine Le Pen right now is looking like the only candidate there that, without question, will make it to that final round. Everybody else is in a state of flux, a lot of corruption allegations going on. Apparently, George Soros is pouring new money into Google to try and stop populist Le Pen, or in fact, any populist at all. This move toward populism and nationalism and sovereignty and our nation first is a direct threat to Soros's dreams of a global government and a one-world empire. And he's apparently willing to spend all of his money that he has to try and get his plan going again, even though it's pretty obvious it's starting to fall apart. But he doesn't want to quit. I have to wonder what all of his children are thinking as he spends their future inheritance on this harebrained scheme. Now, one of George Soros' groups, Human Rights Watch, is calling for the European Union to consider activating a mechanism in the EU Charter called the nuclear option. Everybody's talking nuclear option. It's making me very, very nervous. And basically what they're saying, because Poland is going populist, and Poland is talking about an exit, they want to invoke this rule that allows them, the European Union, to strip Poland of all of its voting rights in the European Council. In other words, it's a sit down and shut the heck up rule. Now, here's something that is really, really juicy. Judicial Watch today released 54 pages of new State Department documents, including a transcript of a September 12th, 2012 telephone conference call with congressional staffers in which then Undersecretary of State for Management Patrick Kennedy admitted the attack on the consulate in Benghazi was not part of any protests. It was a direct breaching attack. It had nothing to do with the protests over that movie. And right now, Patricia Smith has one heck of a defamation lawsuit against Hillary Clinton. Because when Patricia Smith went out and said that she was originally told it had nothing to do with the movie, Hillary Clinton called her a liar on national TV. That's pretty much open and shut. Those ambulance chaser lawyers are going to be lining up outside of Patricia Smith's house right now. It's going to be a big one here. Now, as you know, the original plan of the Bush-Clinton duopoly that grew out of that CIA gun and drug running operation out of Arkansas in the 1980s was to basically declare the White House their perpetual family heritage, handing the White House off back and forth from Bush to Clinton to Clinton to Bush in perpetuity, to make it look like there was still some kind of a choice going on. Well, we really hate Bush. All right, well, you got a Clinton. Can't we get anybody else? No, it's going to be Clinton or Bush. Well, as you know, Chelsea Clinton is starting to make noises about taking a run for Congress as her stepping stone to a potential run for the White House. And I guess to nobody's surprise, she's not getting a lot of support. She's not getting a lot of support from the Democratic National Committee. She's not getting support from liberals. She's described as having nothing to offer, and she's said some very horrible, clueless things about progressives and progressives issues. But more than that, the fact that she doesn't have anything to offer is a repeat of Hillary Clinton, who just wanted the presidency to have the presidency and didn't really have any idea what she was going to do with it. And Chelsea is also, unfortunately, saddled with the Clinton brand, which is not a positive any longer. Hillary tried to take the Clinton brand into her term in the White House, but the Clinton brand is tainted. It is dark and dirty and stained. And Chelsea is, unfortunately, saddled with that now. Now, I've never had a chance to meet Chelsea Clinton or even to listen to her. She may be an okay individual. She might also be the product of the two parents that she is born of, and that has to be taken into consideration. But at this point, she's having a real hard time drawing any kind of support for a run for the Senate. And with the Clinton Family Foundation shutting down to try and evade corruption and tax investigations, Chelsea's going to have a hard time coming up with the money to win. She certainly can't go back to all those people who donated to her mother. They're feeling very burned and used. They don't want to give any more money to the Clintons. They want refunds, actually. Now, newly minted Attorney General Jeff Sessions is already hard at work, and he's starting to pull back on some of the orders passed by Obama during his last days in office, including that ridiculous one about transgender bathrooms all across the country. And they're saying this idea of forcing schools to have transgender or shopping malls or anything, this is a needless burden on the general population and the economy for a group of people who really do represent a very tiny fraction of the population. And again, to me, the solution is obvious. Don't have man and woman on those doors, have penis and vagina, and let everything work its way out. But this idea of allowing men to use the women's restroom because they imagine there are a woman inside, that's nonsense. I mean, look at Caitlyn Jenner, who has had the surgery to make himself look like a woman, but let's get back to reality. If you took a DNA sample from Caitlyn Jenner, it's going to come back, this is a guy. And that's just the way it is, and the bathrooms ought to be set up that way. Now, as you know, one of the really ugly, horrific things that the corporate media did was imply that Melania Trump was a call girl at some point in her past. And there was no foundation for it. And apparently swimsuit model Emily Ratajkowski took to Twitter to basically wag the finger at the New York Times for having even run this story. And apparently one of the feature writers at the newspaper has stepped forward and said, yeah, that was me, and I apologize. Of course, the apology is pretty much buried. It's the way the corporate media works. Blaring headlines for the lies, and the acknowledgement of the lie, the retraction, the apology is buried on page 872 underneath the obituaries. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And apparently at this point, the corporate media, the online corporations, the self-appointed gatekeepers are not even concerned if it's obvious what they're doing. They're just out there to reassert their control over what you think, what you read, what you see, what you hear. And they don't care how they do it. And there's an interesting story floating around. Apparently, people are posting positive, supportive tweets to Donald Trump's Twitter feeds. And they're vanishing almost immediately. And the top comments on Real Donald Trump and the White House Twitter feeds are all negative. Positive replies are not being seen. We're seeing censorship at Twitter. We've been seeing censorship at YouTube. We've been seeing censorship at Facebook and Google. And then they wonder why people are fleeing those services to go over to the independent media, to go over to all the new startup social medias like Scene Life and Gab and VK, to the point where the corporate media has now been caught artificially rigging the number of clicks they get to make it look like they're still relevant, and not to mention cheating their advertisers a little bit. Now, let's get back on over to Syria here, because we were talking about that report that came out in the New York Slimes about how Assad had a secret prison where they were torturing people to death, and 13,000 people had been killed, and it was horrible, and it was just all this other stuff. And the report came from Amnesty International, and the New York Slimes attitude is, well, it's Amnesty International, so it must be true. Well, no, that doesn't follow. Amnesty International claimed they corroborated that story about how soldiers from Iraq who were invading Kuwait were taking premature babies out of the hospital incubators and sending the incubators back to Iraq and leaving the premature babies on the ground to die. Which never made sense anyway. Aren't the nurses and doctors just going to pick the kids up and wrap them in blankets? Because that's what they did before they had the incubators, right? And Amnesty International said, yes, that's absolutely 100% true. And as we all learned afterwards, it was 100% false. The nurse wasn't even really a nurse. She was the daughter of the Kuwait ambassador. And the entire story about the incubators was a complete fiction cooked up by public relations company Hill and Knowlton. It was a complete fake from beginning to end, and Amnesty International put their imprimatur on it. So, as it turns out, according to a story in the offguardian.org, this entire report about Assad having a torture center in Syria was completely fabricated in Great Britain. And there's even a disclaimer buried in it. Well, we don't have hard evidence. We just have, the word of people that we have decided are trustworthy. And every visual in there is a computer graphic. They faked the imagery. It was a complete lie. This report about a torture center is just an update on Assad is using sarin gas on his Alawite supporters, or Saddam has nuclear weapons, or the Lusitania wasn't carrying weapons to Nazi Germany. There was a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. How many times do you have to be lied into a war until you recognize you are being lied into more wars? Now, as if we didn't have enough problems from Fukushima, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, Hanford, and all the rest of it, it's now been confirmed the United States has been using depleted uranium shells in Syria. Now, the United States had promised they were going to stop using depleted uranium munitions following the 2003 Iraq invasion because of the epidemic of severe birth defects that struck not only the people of Iraq, but our returning veterans. And now they're back to using them again, which means the people of Syria and those servicemen exposed to these weapons are going to have children with severe birth defects. But no price is too great to pay for victory in war as long as somebody else is paying the price. All right, I'm going to take a break for commercials. We got callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go to the phones here. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Hey, I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about where we stand as a country right now, and it's been quite apparent for a long time since the Patriot Act that with the total surveillance and wiretapping and email tapping and all that, it was really no longer possible to impeach the president because he could, of course, suborn anybody in Congress or any judge or whatever, and if they happen to be clean, maybe their parents or their kids weren't. But now, I would tell you that not only is it unimpeachable unless the intelligence community wants to get you, and remember that when they bugged their own oversight committee back a couple of years ago, Feinstein's committee for torture, but I don't know if it's governable at all, Mike. I don't know if this country, the way it is right now, with the institutions of the Federal Reserve, the intelligence community, the way the press is, and by the way, let's just look at MSNBC and CNN and all these other corporate media. It's just what they are. They are corporate spokesmen. That's all.
Yes.
They're corporate spokesmen.
And government spokesmen. And Israeli spokesmen.
Yeah, but that's, you ever hear Rachel Maddow, the so-called left talk about peace? Well, because General Electric owns CNBC and MSNBC and all that, of course, they make all the jet engines. They don't want peace, so you never hear that from the left.
Well, that's also why you never hear anything about Fukushima, because General Electric designed those reactors, and there are more than 20 nuclear power plants in the United States with that same flawed design.
So Mike, I'm not sure whether we are right now, this big lumbering mess of a country is even governable at all. With Citizens United, the intelligence community, the Israeli lobby, the banks, honestly, the media. I continue to see parallels between the United States right now and the Soviet Union just months before its final collapse. It's badly factionalized. It is unable to function. The government and the corporate media have lost the faith and trust of the American people. The American people just aren't listening anymore. They're not following orders and instructions. They're not doing as they're being told to do. You're right. This is a government that has lost the ability to actually manage a country. And so who is managing this? I mean, the foreign policy, Trump wants to, Flynn wants to normalize or have a semi-normal relationship with Russia. Flynn wants to reform the intelligence community. He's gone immediately. He's gone. Who can run this government? I mean, who is running it?
There is no one entity running it. Each faction is trying to grab power and control, and it's like a fist fight over the wheel of a sailing ship. The ship still looks like it's sailing along from a distance, but the first big set of rocks that comes along, they're not going to avoid it, and that's going to put a hole in the hull, and the whole thing's going to go down. That's where we are right now. We don't have a calm, steady hand on the helm. And we are seeing the institutions of our country literally at war with each other and tearing the place apart. And all we can do is sit back and watch it. Get a couple of beers and some chips and just enjoy the show. Because, I have to be very honest. I was hoping seriously that with Trump's electoral victory, we had a chance of turning this country around and heading back to our constitutional republic and avoiding a final major collapse. But unfortunately, Trump, he is being blockaded at every turn by people who only see their self-interest and only think in time spans of the next few weeks or few months. And so, unfortunately, I do think this country is headed for a collapse like the Soviet Union. We all have to be prepared to deal with that, because we're going to have 4 or 5 months of some real serious hardship that is going to cause people to sort of reevaluate their views of what is really essential in life and what is really just nonsense and fluffiness. And we're going to have to learn how to be dependent on ourselves, something the government never wanted you to learn. We're going to have to be dependent on our neighbors, our friends, our community, to take care of each other to get through that rough period while a new country is crafted here. And we're going to have to start a new country, like the Russian Republic started a new country, and we're going to have some ironclad rules that, first of all, no more private central banks ever, 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 ever. And we're going to have rules saying that if you're a corporation doing a specific business, you're not allowed to buy up the media. And that's where this situation has to be. We have to have limits on these large bodies of capital, because current history is showing they become a force unto themselves. And it's not like it's a brand new idea. Even Eisenhower warned that the military-industrial complex, the sheer volume of money that was in play and all of its political influence, was a threat to the democratic institutions of our nation. And we have seen the end result. And so in the next country that we're going to form, we're going to have to hard code into that Constitution that there are going to be serious limits on what financial institutions can do, what military institutions can do, and we're going to have to reassert. The purpose of the government is to keep a balance between the needs of the people and the greed of the corporations, and basically be that umpire in the middle, instead of just waltzing on over, lining up with the corporations, which is fascism, and that's what we're living under right now.
You know, Mike, I used to think maybe it could be done with one big pitchforks and torches, the townspeople moving on Dracula's castle. But now there's so many power centers, it's going to be moving on Dracula's castles. There's many of them. And
well, what we do is we sit back and we wait for Dracula to declare war on the Wolfman, who's going to declare war on the 3D piranhas, who's going to declare war on... And basically, we're heading into a faction fight. The last thing the American people should be thinking about doing is any kind of a popular uprising, because that would galvanize and unite all those government institutions back together in a sense of self-defense and survival. We just all need to sit back and let them start tearing each other apart. And
really
we could even
something.
encourage it a little bit here, you know. Call up the FBI and say, the NSA are saying bad things about you.
And then there's the Soros thing about him funding Ryan and McCain and Lindsey Graham and Kasich.
I look at Soros and I keep thinking there's never an asteroid around when you really need one.
But all these guys, Soros, Adelson, Milton, Saban, Bloomberg, all these guys, they got to go. No.
They're the front face of another mechanism, and that is the real problem isn't the people. The real problem is allowing vast amounts of wealth to be concentrated in a few hands. That's really what lies behind it, because that much wealth, it almost seems inevitable. When somebody gets that rich, they get delusions of godhood. And if you really think about it, especially with the advent of all these computers that are running the financial systems of the planet, the global financial system is almost displaying its own behaviors outside human agency. And it's programmed with one goal only, which is maximize profitability without any other considerations. And that's what's spinning out of control, and it's taking the rest of the economy with it. And again, I'm not a Marxist, but I do think that there has to be a system set up that limits wealth inequality rather than enhances and amplifies it, because it's these giant pools of wealth in the hands of unelected individuals that is the root of all this damage. They're all running around with delusions of being Napoleon, saying, I've got enough money, I can buy the world and make it what I want it to be. And it's sort of like living in Westworld and realizing all of a sudden that you're just one of the robots, and the people who own the place are just a bunch of nutcases living out their fantasies with their money.
Mike, one more thing, if I may say. I'll shut up and get off then, but I'm terrified after your Eddie Griffin story about that resignation of the Secret Service head yesterday.
Yeah.
That is so worrying to me.
Well, I mean, there are intelligence analysts in Russia right now who are warning that yes, America's intelligence communities are going to take out Trump the way they took out John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy and tried to take out Kennedy.
Go do God's work there, Michael. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. How do empires end? Slowly, then suddenly, and not just. This is the Western Empire, and the wheels are not coming off. They have come off. All you have to do is look in France and Germany. Le Pen is like Trump. They're going to do the same exact thing like with Brexit. They're going to throw monkey wrenches. Oh, let me tell you, it's over, Mike. I voted for Trump, but I'm saying it's everything is factions now. This is like pretty much toward the end. I think.
I would agree. I think we've gone past the point of recovery or rescue. It really is time to just sit back and let it finish dying and not let it harm any more people than are absolutely necessary and just start on over. No empire lasts forever. Some empires collapse quite quickly. Some take a very long time to do it. We all talk about the fall of ancient Rome. It didn't happen in a day. It's just like they say Rome wasn't built in a day. It didn't fall in a day. And at the time it was starting to come apart, most people in Rome didn't realize what was going on because they were too close to the problem. Looking back, we can see there was a point at which obviously Rome's expansion and greatness and wealth began to decline. Very obviously, the United States has been an empire in decline for 30 years.
Hey, Mike, on Ukraine, I think isn't Crimea, that wasn't actually part of Ukraine. That was just given administrative rights.
Well,
right?
Khrushchev gave Crimea to Ukraine, which was actually illegal under Soviet law at the time. But Khrushchev himself was a native Ukrainian, and that's why he did that. But just like we've seen our leaders violate the law and do things that they're really not supposed to do, that's how Ukraine got Crimea, is Khrushchev basically gave it to them. And it was a violation of Soviet law for him to do that, and he should have been held to account. We could have avoided this whole mess right now. The whole focus on Crimea, though, is to try and deny modern-day Russia a warm water seaport where they can have ships stationed to basically confine them up to their northern fleet, where during the winter months when they're frozen in, they really can't operate very well at all. But that's really what the sticking point is. That was one of the major agendas behind the coup d'etat in Kiev, along with Yushchenko's not wanting to merge with the EU and wanting to merge with Russia. They wanted to drag Ukraine and its wealth that it had then, doesn't have anymore, into the EU, and at the same time make Crimea, as part of the EU, off limits for a Russian naval fleet.
And Mike, did you hear about how they're going to be having rolling blackouts and power outages because they got shortage of coal, I believe?
Yes.
It is, I was reading.
Yeah,
I feel sorry for those.
Yeah, the infrastructure has not kept up with the growth in population. And most planners in government, when they think about enlarging infrastructure, bringing on new power plants and so forth, are thinking in terms of the natural growth of their indigenous population. But what we have going on in Europe and the United States, especially Southern California, is just all these illegal immigrants and refugees pouring on in, and it's distorting the demographics. And it's stressing infrastructure that is already operating at its upper limit.
I thought California was supposed to be a communist paradise.
I'm sorry. I don't think there is any such thing as a communist paradise. I, for one, would not want to live in a world where no matter what you do or how hard you work, you cannot improve your own immediate life. I think there has to be a middle ground there, where those who don't want to work can just sort of coast along. Those who do want to work and achieve something, be an astronomer, be a musician, be a filmmaker or whatever, have the option to do that and go on and enjoy some modest reward for that. But what we have to have is a society that makes it impossible for those with political power and influence to simply change the rules so that wealth flows out of the pockets of the people automatically and into their pockets without them returning anything of substantive value to the society, which is what we have now on Wall Street.
And Mike, one more thing real quick. I want to ask Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, where was Muammar Gaddafi's human rights?
Oh, he doesn't count. He's just one of the, he's bad. Human rights only applies to us and to the Israelis. It doesn't apply to those other people. I mean, what's wrong with you? You some kind of a commie?
Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, a couple of things for you, Michael. For one, hello, aloha, and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay.
And I have a horrible thought. You know what that is?
No, I'm sure you will enlighten us, though.
Oh, well, I'm not sure how much light would shed, but hey, what can I tell you? I'm afraid I would fail or flunk the DNA test. You know why?
Why?
Because whenever hubby and I go to the store, and all of a sudden the cashier looks over at you and says, well, hey, guys, how y'all doing? You got to find everything? And I'm like, huh? I had to step back for a moment, take a look down below to see what's hanging or not hanging. And I look over at him, and it's like, okay, where did I hang the stock at? So go figure.
Well, I think that's a case of using guys as all-inclusive. And I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill there. And that is one area in which there was some validity to the concerns about how do we frame the language to be inclusive of both genders without biasing it one way or the other. Unfortunately, I think in this day and age, we've got more important things to be concerning ourselves with.
Well, true, but I was trying to shed some humor on the scenario, though.
Okay.
But you know, when people are exposed to that day in and day out, it's no wonder there's not gender dysphoria. I mean, come on. But anyway, on a serious note, I have a question for you.
Well, I'm going to have to hold you through the commercial break here. So don't hang up. We're going to put you on hold, and I'll come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Francis in North Carolina. You had a question.
Yes, which actually, when you went to break, posed an odd thought to my head was, then why even have the word gals, which is the opposite of guys? But anyway, have you ever heard of someone by the name of Kevin Shipp who published a book called In the Company of Shadows?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do recall that.
Okay, because when you said about how many different groups there are or whatever that has to do with this, that, or whatever as far as alphabet soup goes of agency, it's like, oh my gosh. So I did come across a video regarding a lecture that he had done, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was blown, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, and there is such a thing as still the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, regardless. So, anyway, I just thought I would check with you about that.
Well, I think a lot of people are asking the question, why does our government need so many different intelligence agencies that are very often at odds with each other, competing with each other, and certainly in the case of the CIA, are running their own policy. Everyone's talking about, did Flynn violate the Logan Act? Well, certainly that CIA gun and drug running operation in the 1980s out of Arkansas down to Nicaragua was a clear violation, not just of the Logan Act, but of the Bolin Amendment. And we should not have intelligence agencies that see themselves as above the law and even above the civil government. And when they were first setting up the CIA, Wild Bill Donovan had doubts about it and said it's got to be kept under control or it'll become a threat to the nation. Harry Truman said exactly the same thing. And now we're in a situation where I'm looking at this article that came out of Sputnik News, where the intelligence apparatus is out there saying Trump is going to die in jail. We're going to get him out, and we're going to, and that's a coup d'état within our own borders, and we should not be tolerant of that at all. And I understand the need for good intelligence around the world, but let's focus on the people who are of concern to the operation of this government and leave the individual citizens alone. And we don't need as many intelligence agencies. Because very often they are fighting with each other. They're withholding information from each other because it's all turf wars.
Yeah. Well, Michael, now you know why I tend to refer to D.C. as a district of criminals more than anything else, because there isn't one politician, attorney, lawyer, whatever you want to call it, or corporate head or lobbyist that hasn't violated some law, some regulation, some policy or whatever, every which way but so.
Well, I would be willing to wager a nickel that people like Ron Paul and Cynthia McKinney, if they did violate any policies or laws, they're really minor ones, as opposed to like the Clintons, who broke just about every single law there is out there. Okay?
Well, that's as it is. Have a good one. Thanks again.
All right, thanks an
Later.
awful lot. And we're coming up on our station identification break. We've got 2 more calls waiting, and we'll get to those calls and some more news after we come back from station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We've got some calls waiting. I'm going to get to them in a minute, but I do want to fit some news in here. Apparently back on February 10th, there was an incident where the USS Porter was cruising in the Black Sea near Russian territory, and some Russian aircraft came on out to take a look. And the spin here is that Russia is bad and we are good, that Russia was being very unprofessional and unsafe in their flybys. They didn't have their transponders turned on. Oh, those terrible, terrible Ruskies, what are they doing? And Russia, of course, is responding, saying that there was nothing unprofessional or unsafe of the flybys. The aircraft didn't get close to the USS Porter, and pointing out that we have the USS Porter that is on a regular patrol mission near Russia, tens of thousands of miles away from their own shores, and then they act like it's a surprise when Russian aircraft come on out to take a look and see what they're doing. But there's that implicit attitude of the U.S. military can go wherever they want and do whatever they do, and anybody who tries to defend themselves, oh, they're the bad guys. They're not allowed to fight back. They're not allowed to defend themselves. Making a similar thing over this Russian spy ship that is off the coast of the Atlantic. And first of all, let's be very honest, Russia, and for that matter, a lot of other countries, including the United States, do have intelligent ships all over the globe. Remember the USS Liberty that Israel tried to sink and frame Egypt for? That was an intelligence-gathering ship. These are very, very common. They're just trying to make a stink about it to push that agenda. Russia's bad, Russia's evil, Russia's coming to get you. Another bit of the Russian bashing going on is that the U.S. is accusing Russia of deploying a cruise missile that is in violation of a 1987 treaty that bans American and Russian intermediate-range missiles based on land. The air-launched and sea-launched ones are still okay, but the land-based cruise missiles of intermediate range are banned under a 1987 treaty. Well, what does the United States government expect when they have been violating treaties all over the place? They violated the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in their handling of Iran. The entire Aegis CEC system was a violation of the ABM Treaty. And again, we have this attitude that other countries have to keep their treaty obligations to us, but we're off the hook because we're exceptional in the United States. From Russia's point of view, the United States cannot be trusted on any of its treaty commitments. Treaties are therefore null and void right from the very, very start. Now, there's an alarming video that was not supposed to be made public, but it was brought out in a Freedom of Information Act. It's a Pentagon video that's warning of an unavoidable dystopian future for the world's largest cities. And basically, what they're portraying in this video looks like a cross between Escape from New York and RoboCop, with warriors and Divergent thrown on in. And it is not a very pleasant picture of what the New World Order has in store for those of you who are going to be imprisoned in the urban areas. Because don't for a moment think that you're going to be allowed to live out in the wild. That makes it too hard to track and tax you. Even Soylent Green had that. As bad as the cities were, everybody was ordered to live in a city because the wilderness, the plains, that was all farmland, and that was kept private, and you were not allowed to go there, unless you were very rich, of course. All righty, let's see. We're going to take another phone call. Dave in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Mike, when you drain a swamp, you expose a lot of ugly stuff, and it stinks for a while. And that's exactly what's happening now. Flynn thing, listen, everybody's panicking in the Trump camp. People are freaking out. Everybody needs to calm down. It's normal to hire and fire people, okay? Things have to settle out. Flynn was not very well liked in the inner circles of power. That I got from a private source. But everybody in the Trump camp needs to calm down because this is normal. Okay, if there's going to be more coming.
I disagree. This is not normal. I don't think we've ever had a time in the history of the United States of America when the institutions of government were in open defiance of the president.
Well, but Mike, there's a civil war. Okay, this is the deep state in its death throes. Okay, nobody said this was going to be easy. Okay, there's a civil war going on within the intelligence community. Okay, a guy named Steve Pachinik that I really value his opinion and his analysis. He's an insider, very smart guy. He knows a lot of stuff. But there's a civil war going on within the intelligence community right now. And that's where a lot of this stuff originates. The deep state is freaking out. That's what this is. And they're trying to knock Trump out. But Trump's supporters have to calm down and fight back and oppose these people. It's not a time to be sad and hang your head and say, oh, it's over. No. We have to fight this. Okay? This is not going to be easy.
No, I agree. I agree with you on that one, and I suspect that Trump is still waiting to get through his little confirmation dance with the Senate, and after that he's going to have a lot more latitude to take action. But I agree with you, he has to retake the initiative. Right now, unfortunately, he is seen as being on the defensive, and that is a very, very bad thing. He needs to act decisively, but again, he's constrained because right now the Senate is still holding his confirmation of his nominees hostage.
Well, he needs to take the gloves off. So do his supporters, everybody that supports Trump.
Yes.
Okay, it's a fight. It's a fight, and we're in it, and we can't give up. And we can't get depressed or disheartened or give up. And,
well, I'll agree with you on that part of it. The only part I disagreed with you is that this is normal. It is not normal. We're in uncharted waters here. We have never had a time in the history of the United States of America where the entire institutions of federal government and the media were just in open rebellion against the president and in open rebellion against democracy itself.
Well, let me rephrase that, Mike.
Okay.
It's not normal according to what we know as normal. It's a process. I mean, in the business world, which is where Trump comes from, people are hired and fired all the time. If they don't perform, they're fired. Now, Flynn, he had to be removed. It might have been a mistake. It may not have been. The guy coming in after him might even be better. But there's some doubt about what's going on with his what he did with Pence and everything else. It might have been a strategic move to let him go. It's not normal per se, but process is to be expected. It's just like in the business world.
Well, I think it would be safe to say that the reactions of the establishment are expected and pretty much what we predicted. But it is still rather amazing to see, and certainly for our younger listeners here, pay very close attention here because there's never been a situation like this in the history of the United States before, and it could very easily lead to the shattering of our entire country. And it's all because of all these people with too much money, too much power, who are only thinking about their own personal interest. They have absolutely no sense of patriotism to the nation as a whole, no concern for the general population as a whole. They're just out there trapped in their ideologies and their bank balances, and it is a terrible, terrible way to be running a nation. And I agree with that earlier caller. Our nation is almost functioning out of control. We were hoping we expect Donald Trump to be that firm hand on the helm, but right now he's literally dealing with a crew in mutiny.
Well, I agree, Mike, but, like I said, he needs to take the gloves off, and, if it's going to go down, well, let's go down fighting, folks.
Well, I think that Trump will take the gloves off after he's got all of his confirmations out of the Senate. But again, time alone will solve that mystery. Dave, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Going to switch to Pat in Vermont. Aloha, Pat. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Oh, and before we go to Pat, got to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just rejoining our network. And again, if you have information about Snapchat's facial recognition system and what it's being used for, please email me today. I don't want speculation. I don't want guesswork. I don't want suspicions. I'm looking for actual hard factual data on what's going on with Snapchat and their facial recognition. So, Pat in Vermont, what's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I wanted to just compare the attitudes of Dustin, whom I'm normally much in favor of what he has to say, and what Dave just offered. I'm a Jersey boy, too, transplanted to Vermont, so shout out to Jersey today. A lot of this has to be attitude right now. We have a huge fight. I mean, this is not just a ball game. This is a ball game where the losers are going to be put in prison, where they're going to be hung. So this is a fight for our life, and the entire world is looking at this, and the entire world is praying that we get our act together and we back our president. This negative attitude has to go. It's like being in a ball game and we're going to sit there in the first half of the first quarter and be crying like little girls that don't know how to play the game, that we're getting bruises and we have to get a Band-Aid because we got a little skin on our elbow.
Wait a minute. I think you're confusing us with the liberals.
Well, no, I'm not, because if you go back and listen to the show tomorrow, anybody, to the comments that were made, we're sitting there crying in our soup. Now, you can't run this next 4 to 8 years like it's a sprint. It's only been 3.5 weeks. And look at the progress we've made. Look at it. It's huge. Now, granted, they're fighting back like crazy because they're scared for their lives. Now, I'm not talking about the libtards. The heck with them. They're not even a faction. As soon as everybody realizes that George Soros is paying for that, they're going to disappear. They're going to dry up. I'm talking about the people that are identified by this guy. I don't know if you ever heard Robert Steele, I think his name is,
yes.
The ex-CIA guy. I really think President Trump, should interview this man and take him seriously, because I think he has some answers. As far as the inside traitors in his own house, stabbing him in the back, that has to be taken care of now.
I agree.
Can't wait till all of these approvals are made. He needs to come out boxing. He needs to come out in the next round and start throwing some knockouts.
I agree with you. I agree with you. It isn't just that these people inside the White House are obstructing him and causing chaos. They are in control of the information flowing to Donald Trump. And so voices that have good advice for him are simply not being allowed through. Remember what I said mind control is? All mind control is controlling the mind by controlling what it knows, and that's the game they're playing on Donald Trump right now. That's why I talked about Merlin. That's why I talked about Merlin yesterday.
If I'm on the...
Pat, hold a second. I need to complete a thought, and then you can continue.
I'm sorry.
That's why I was talking yesterday about a kitchen cabinet and about the legend of Merlin. Donald Trump is in dire need of information sources that are not being controlled and filtered by the White House staff. Okay, Pat, take it away.
Yeah, again, if anybody from President Trump's staff is listening right now, I hope he gets Robert Steele in there from the CIA and listens to this man. There's so much good information, like you said, from outsiders that can actually give a lot of insight. But I for one, think he's doing a fantastic job, and that the things that are falling on his head are not his own doing primarily. I mean, obviously people are going to make mistakes, but you can't. The first time somebody throws an interception, you can't say, "Oh, geez, he's a bum, throw him out." I mean, you got to give the man a chance.
No, we're not saying that. We're not saying. I mean, I think you're misreading some of what We're basically upset that we are seeing this establishment in open defiance of the president, an open rebellion.
No doubt.
And to that list of people that Donald Trump should be talking to, I would also add Ray McGovern.
Good deal.
Yeah, I think that would be another person that Trump should be talking to, and as well as Ron Paul, and there's a bunch of other names there as well. And I wish Cynthia McKinney. I wish Donald Trump, in his embrace of the independent media, would spread that out a little bit more because right now his primary contact in the independent media has his own agenda, and we all know that it does.
Right. Well, just last word. I don't want to waste everybody else's time here, but just try to keep it positive. Try to give the man the support that he deserves. He's risking his life to fight this battle for us instead of doing what any billionaire in his right mind would be doing, and that's enjoying his life. So if we don't give him credit right now, then, who are we? So that's it, and thanks for your time.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. The last two callers, I agree with in some ways, and other ways I don't. I think that, and I do agree with you, too, about McGovern and another guy who used to work at Steele, both of them used to work for the good CIA people, and the Ron Paul people. These are just people he should be dealing with, but he's not. Now, whether he's doing that purposely or if he doesn't even know who these people are, I don't know. But I can't go and excuse what happened with Flynn. It is not excusable. He caved. He gave in. You say in a fight, somebody showed dog in a fight, like in a boxing match or something. He showed dog. He quit. He gave in. He gave up his most valuable man.
Well, I'm not sure. It was a bad move for Donald Trump's White House to have made. Politics is perception. But again, Donald Trump is surrounded by people who are giving him advice that is not in Donald Trump's best interest. And he's not really picked up on that yet. And this is part of that dangerous naivete he came into the White House with. He's used to working in business, where if you're working for me, you are doing your best for me. But that's not Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is full of people who owe favors, or they're compromised by blackmail information, or they've got ideological, fanatical beliefs. And we know that a lot of the people in the White House are holdovers from Obama, and they're actively working against him. And we're still hearing rumors that there's a coming shakeup at the high levels of the White House, including possibly the chief of staff. But again, Trump may be holding off. Let me finish. Trump may be holding off on that until after he gets his confirmations from the Senate.
He's only got one confirmation left. That's the Labor Department, and that's not really that big of a deal.
No, well, he's got a Supreme Court judge to get confirmed.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But as far as everything else goes, first of all, he shouldn't have gone with these people. He should have never put Priebus in. He shouldn't have gotten what's that fat dude's name that the press secretary...
Sean Spicer?
Spicer. He shouldn't have put Spicer in there.
I'm not sure about that one. I know that Spicer is under attack by the corporate media because he's not taking their guff, but right now everybody's tuning in to watch Spicer's White House press conferences. He's getting higher ratings than game shows and other news broadcasts. He's a very powerful draw right now to get Trump's message out. I think it would be a mistake for Trump to let him go.
No, I thought he should have taken Laura Ingraham from the get-go, and she even said she'd take it for her country. And I think she would have been a much better spokesman for the
well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one. I think Sean Spicer's doing a tremendous job. He's standing firm in the face of that corporate media, and that's what Trump needs right now. Trump needs somebody who's going to hold that shield up and say, all right, let's calm down, people. And Spicer is fully on...
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm saying, if I was Trump right now, this is what I would do. And I even urged him. I don't know if he got rid of him, but I tweeted him. Get Flynn back. If you don't want to put him as NSA, make him your chief of staff and make, let's say, Steve Bannon head of your NSA. Get him back. Get him back into the
I think that will happen. I think Trump will bring Flynn back in some capacity. He really wanted him to be there. But again, my conclusion at this point, and I could be wrong, but what I'm thinking is Trump is still in his treading lightly while he figures out what's going on around him. And I think that Supreme Court nomination is going to be the big, ugly fight. And I think once that's over and done with, Trump's going to have a lot more latitude to get on up there and say, all right, I've learned the job now. We're going to start moving forward. Okay? Got to let you go.
He also needs to get
Got to let you. Sorry, Mark. Sorry, got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines for a little bit because I got a lot of news and I'm not getting to it. And I'm already getting emails complaining I'm taking too many phone calls. So Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Actually, I called about the Oroville Dam, but I want to make one point about Mike Flynn. The guy still has his stars, and now he has the latitude to be a kitchen cabinet officer.
Yes.
Like both of. He still has his contacts, still has his stars, and he can be a back channel. Okay. Now about Oroville. I've been comparing and contrasting the Oroville situation to when I was 15 years old in 1976, the Grand Teton Dam on the Teton River in Idaho.
Yes, that was
a project of the Federal Bureau, which I don't remember. I mean, I was pretty oblivious, I guess, as a kid, and I can't say I remember it, but I would have been old enough to remember it. But this was a dam built by the Federal Bureau of Reclamation. It says, I did a little Google Genius Wikipedia research. Just a few facts about this. The dam was built by the Federal Bureau of Reclamation, and upon completion, as it was filling, this thing fell apart right away and severely damaged several communities downstream. Ended in 11 deaths, and like 13,000 cattle died. Several communities were flooded. It took out lumber yard with logs, caused logs to be floating downstream, a gasoline refinery, which put flaming gasoline in the water, lighting up these logs. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of damage. It cost like $100 million to build or something, and they had to shell out $300 million in damages. Now, that being said, okay, the Oroville Dam was actually predates that dam. But yet it was built by the state of California, and it's a larger, more robust, type of construction, and it's hydroelectric and all that sort of stuff. But these spillways apparently have been neglected for 40 or 50 years. It's not clear that it could result in as catastrophic a failure as the Teton Dam, but if it did, and the entire content of the Teton Dam, about a third of it fell out and all the water flooded out. If such a thing were to occur with the Oroville Dam, the destruction would be many times worse, and you could end up with a wall of water hundreds of feet high flowing through numerous towns, that are overpopulated now or that have been allowed to build close to the, just in the floodplain, and also. This could result in, I've heard estimates of water 30 feet, anywhere from 5 to 30 feet of water making its way down all the way to Sacramento.
Yeah, I've been hearing the same kind of numbers. Yeah. I heard a max of 100, but that's if the main dam itself fails catastrophically. And I don't think anybody's really concerned about that. The concern is if the emergency spillway were to fail, there would be a massive release of water, but it would be much slower. And so it wouldn't be as high. There wouldn't be a tidal wave, but there definitely would be a flood.
Right, exactly. And the economics, somebody pointed out this morning on another radio show, which I thought was very insightful, even though you have all these insurance companies, and let's remember there's the difference between homeowners insurance and flood insurance, so hopefully all these people have, this federally, sponsored flood insurance.
Yeah, there's only one problem with that. There's only one problem with that. It's like earthquake insurance. If you actually live somebody where there might be an earthquake or a flood, you cannot afford the insurance. If you live someplace like we do where we're 400 feet up on the top of a hill, we can get flood insurance for $1 a month.
Right. Well, this could cause huge insurance company failures, which would, ripple through, Lloyd's of London brokerage and all that kind of stuff. So if it were a disaster, it could actually be economically catastrophic for our nation and the world economy as well.
Well, there's also the loss of the power station. There's the loss of the aquifer. I mean, if that thing lets go, it is a disaster with a capital D. We already know that, okay?
Absolutely. Big, so here's hoping that they manage to shore it up at the spillways.
Well, they're going to have to get through a week of heavy storms that are coming on in. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We'll be back after these few words. And And aloha, America. Welcome to our show here. We're going to get some news done now. The phone lines are closed. Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu had a press conference earlier today, and it's got everybody in a tizzy. Oh, Trump is on board with Israel. Well, we knew he was going to be close with Israel. And they're talking about how Donald Trump promises Israel that Iran will never get the bomb. He's going to protect Israel from the Iranian nuclear bomb. But here's what's really going on, and you need to pay attention, because along with that, Donald Trump was saying we need Israel to back off the settlements. Okay? And here's where it gets very clever, because you and I and Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump all know Iran isn't really trying to build a nuclear weapon. It's all a fraud. So Trump can stand there and say, Iran will never get the bomb. And he doesn't have to worry about it. Doesn't have to deliver on it. Iran isn't building a bomb. They just want to be left alone. But Israel is stealing more of Palestinian land, and now the burden is on Netanyahu to prove good faith by doing something about it. Knowing that Trump doesn't have to do anything to be able to claim to have delivered on his promise, Iran is not going to get a bomb. Now, yesterday, of course, was Valentine's Day. Oh, before we get into that, I got to share something. People send me all kinds of wonderful things, and I apologize to the people listening on RBN who are not seeing this on BAM User TV. Somebody actually sent me this. You've seen scans of this sort of thing in my Maps Tell the Stories. This is an actual printed map of Palestine that was printed in 1894. And I am going to get that thing framed for the wall here. All right, and I thank you very much. I really did appreciate that little bit of history to have in my sweaty little hands here. Yesterday was Valentine's Day. It also, sadly, was the 72nd anniversary of the firebombing of Dresden, Germany. And you need to go back and look at what was going on, because it was an horrific war crime. Dresden was not a military center. They were a cultural center. And the agenda behind the firebombing of Dresden was a psychological shock to the German people. Dresden was famous for architecture, art, China. Dresden, China was the envy of the world. And they firebombed the place. 100,000 civilians were incinerated. And all those priceless art treasures of the city were just erased. And it was done purely to shock the German people at the outright brutality of it. And this is why Donald Trump was absolutely right when he was out there chastising the corporate media. And the media say, oh, Russia's bad, Russia's doing this, and Russia's doing that. And Trump says, you think we're innocent? And he's absolutely right. No, we're not innocent. There's the Dresden firebombing. There are the concentration camps that the Allies built at the end of World War II, in which hundreds of thousands of Germans were literally starved to death. The United States is not innocent. They are not morally, spiritually better than other governments. All right, let's talk about the economic news a little bit. The world's second largest stockpile of gold leaves the United States. And this goes all the way back to that show we did for the History Channel, America's Book of Secrets, The Gold Conspiracy, about how there was supposed to be a huge amount of gold in the vaults of the New York Federal Reserve. It didn't belong to the Federal Reserve. It was being kept there by European nations who were concerned that it not fall into the hands of the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union invaded Europe, which of course they never did. It was just more of this propaganda to get the Cold War going. And so now, as the United States is seen as less than trustworthy with the gold, nations are demanding it back. And Germany was one of the first ones to demand their gold back. And partly it was questions over the inability of the Federal Reserve to even allow them to see their gold. It was the discovery of gold bars with tungsten cores bearing the hallmarks of Fort Knox and the New York Federal Reserve. And it was accelerated by the fact that the first shipment of gold back to Germany from the New York Federal Reserve were not the original numbered and stamped bullion bars, but replacement bars that were actually not as pure. And so Germany's been trying to be polite all about this. The Bundesbank has been out there saying nothing to worry about. We're a private central bank. We trust all of our brother private central banks. You don't need to worry about it. Well, I remember when this story first came out, there was an editorial over at CNBC that literally said it doesn't matter if the gold isn't actually there, as long as we have a paper record that says it's there. That's all that counts, which was nonsense. Well, slowly but surely, Germany is managing to get their gold out of the New York Federal Reserve. As gold prices are artificially kept down, the New York Fed's been able to buy enough gold to replace it. But they're still dealing with an issue of other nations that want their gold returned, and they're getting the big stall about it. Now, everyone's always talking about gold. Gold this, gold that, so forth and so on. But in terms of dollar for dollar, silver may actually be in a position to outperform gold because, according to Theodore Butler, who's a silver analyst, he's saying right now there is a shortage of physical supplies. And so far, silver has not fallen into that trap of overprinting paper contracts. But there's literally investors and commercial users, because silver has commercial use, not as much now since chemical photography went away. But there's a demand, and the demand is starting to drive the price up. And now's a good time to buy on in. And I know silver has that romantic idea of being, gold has that romantic idea of being gold, but you can invest in silver for a lot less initial capital. And that means there's a lot less tracking going on. So this may be a good time to start getting into silver. Now, Danielle DiMartino Booth, who is an insider at the Federal Reserve, has come on out with a statement that may sound shocking, but we already know it's true. The debt is unsustainable. And to be accurate, it always was. Because private central banks, by design, create more debt than money with which to pay the debt. And they keep it ticking along with a pyramid scheme, which is to find more and more new borrowers to allow the creation of new money, some of which pays the interest on the old money, to keep that pyramid going. But at the point where they cannot find any more borrowers, it all starts to come down. And that's what they mean. The debt is unsustainable because they can't generate new loans in enough volume to keep the system propped up. And that is true not just in the United States, it is true all over the world. No pyramid scheme ever lasts forever. It can't happen. The Federal Reserve, having the entire U.S. population to play with, was able to get their pyramid scheme to last for a little over 100 years. But it's already showing signs of strain. Apparently, retailer MC Sports has now declared bankruptcy, 68 stores to liquidate. Titan Machinery is going to close 15 stores. And corporate America is very, very concerned over Trump's Twitter account, because every time Trump comes out with comments about various companies and various economic issues, it can actually drive the volatile market into more volatility. And apparently, as soon as Trump was actually elected, corporations are setting up what they call war rooms, where they monitor President Trump's tweets, and they are there to immediately respond to them, to push back, to try and prevent the public opinion from turning away from them and toward Donald Trump. There's going to be a huge fight over vaccines. Going to be a huge fight over vaccines and trying to protect the vaccine makers' corporate profits. Another story coming out of SHTFplan.com. The college education system is on the fast track to destruction. And they're basically talking about the growing awareness of unpayable student loan debt, coupled with the growing awareness that universities, colleges, are not really providing an education that allows their graduates to get the jobs to pay off those student loans, partly because those jobs, at least up until Trump, don't exist in the United States of America. And as a result, enrollment numbers are going into decline. And I think the display that was put on publicly by all these college snowflakes has really turned a lot of parents off on the idea of sending their own children to college. You know, we spend all this money, or we borrow all this money for my kid to go to college, and this is what they're going to turn into? This idea that everybody should have a college education was a marketing scheme. The economy only supports so many college graduates. College has been sold as a fashion accessory now. That's why you have all these bizarre degrees that you can claim to have that don't really translate to sellable job skills, like women's studies, or art history, or white privilege. I mean, some of these college courses are just bizarre. It's amazing. Now, major indicator of the future of Obamacare. Everyone's out there saying, oh, Trump's going to betray us on Obamacare. Not so. Okay? Right now, for this year, the Internal Revenue Service has announced that because of Donald Trump's executive order instructing agencies to provide relief from Obamacare, the IRS will not reject tax returns that fail to answer the health insurance question. You can leave it blank. And that means those people who cannot afford those Obamacare compliant policies are not going to get hit with that penalty this year. And that is going to be significant. So let's turn to the refugee immigration problem, because it's really out of control. It is now being estimated that refugees are going to cost Sweden $32 billion this year. That's 16 times what they were estimating originally when all of this refugee policy was being set up. They're being flooded. They were expecting a trickle. They were going to tolerate it. They were going to take care of a trickle. Right now, out of all those refugees who have gone into Sweden, who are going to cost them $32 billion this year, only 500 of those refugees have jobs. That's how out of control it is. Now, I know we've all been poking fun at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals over upholding the stay on Donald Trump's travel moratorium, but they've come out with a decision that somewhat has redeemed them in the eyes of the public. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld that illegal aliens entering the United States do not have an automatic right to legal representation. That providing of legal representation guaranteed to U.S. citizens in the Constitution applies to U.S. citizens. You don't get to sneak across our border and then demand a taxpayer-funded lawyer. Now, here's a little question for you. What did Presidents Hoover, Truman, and Eisenhower have in common? Let you think about that for a little bit. Have to have the game show music. Da 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 da. Okay, time's up. And this is going to be interesting. During the Depression of the 1930s, Herbert Hoover ordered the depression of all illegal aliens in order to make jobs available to American citizens that desperately needed work. We are in that same situation today. We have over 90 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for weeks, for months, and years. And the illegals are pouring in, the refugees are pouring on in. They're being given preferential job treatment, even though under the law they're not supposed to work here. Now, following the end of World War II, Harry Truman deported over 2 million illegal aliens in order to create jobs for returning veterans. They also encouraged the women who'd gone to the factories to return home to be housewives. And there's where Hollywood TV came in to help, because during the war it was Rosie the Riveter and we can do it and we can get on out there. And as soon as World War II is over, Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver and all these shows that idealized the home of the working father and the mother at home taking care of the children, which was, of course, the environment I grew up in. But these were presidents who put the American worker ahead of foreigners. In 1954, I was 2 years old at the time, Dwight Eisenhower deported 13 million Mexicans. The program was called Operation Wetback. You can just imagine what the media would do if somebody called an immigration program Operation Wetback today. Oh, it's defamatory, it's this, it's that. Boy, don't you miss the days when people could just say what was on their mind and not have a bunch of easily offended cupcakes screaming at them all the time. Eisenhower kicked all the illegals out so that not just the World War II, but the returning veterans from the Korean War would have jobs. And it only took him 2 years to do it. And Eisenhower had only 1/10 the manpower of the current Immigration Customs Enforcement. If those presidents can do it, why can't Trump? So, now then, coming up here on our next commercial break. Apparently, at one of these incidents with Milo Yiannopoulos, there was a shooting that was involved up in Washington State. And there was a shooter at the University of Washington. And the guy claimed he'd fired in self-defense. But there's something weird going on, because according to the evidence records, the phone used by the shooter had been wiped clean before it got to the police. Somebody went to the trouble of literally erasing the memory of the phone. What was on there that they didn't want to have seen? All right, we're going to be right back after station identification. I'm sorry, this is a commercial break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and let's talk about the Oroville Dam. It is a serious situation, and given how we have seen governments and corporations and the media handle other disasters in the past, we have a right to be concerned. When the Deepwater Horizon disaster happened, they were saying, it's no big deal, we'll make the oil disappear. Obama flew down there with one of his daughters and took a swim in water that was really kind of very close to the Gulf of Mexico to prove how safe it was. Certainly the way we were getting nothing but reassuring platitudes about Fukushima when that happened. And here we are all these years later, and it's just turned into an absolute nightmare there. So we need to sort of temper our view of Oroville through that lens of past, prior, disappointing history. Right now, there is a flash flood watch on for the central Sacramento Valley for the next 3 days. This includes the area around Oroville. Now, the rain has already started today. It's expected to last an entire week, and it's really going to be getting intense next week. It's going to be kind of heavy tomorrow, a little lighter over the weekend. Not that I have much confidence in long-term predictions by the weather department, but they're saying before the rain stops, it will get very, very heavy. Now, yesterday we were talking about this story that was in Russia Today that said the evacuation order had been rescinded, and they quoted an official at the dam as saying they believe the dam may be able to survive the coming storms. And obviously I reacted to that word may. Don't you know for sure? And already we're starting to get a bit of a pullback because the people who are living in that area down below the Oroville Dam are already being told to maintain situational awareness and to be prepared for another possible evacuation. People who are unable to move rapidly, meaning injured, infirm, wheelchairs and so forth, are being told to remain at their present evacuation stations. So it is a serious, serious situation over there. And we're not getting all the information, certainly in the corporate media. Now, the reports we're getting from people who are near the dam itself indicates that the primary area of concern is that emergency spillway, because it is a concrete spillway, but it's sitting on top of packed earth. And they were hoping that the extra water was just going to go over that. There was no protection for the hill slope downstream of it. But the real problem is that as the water came on over and churned, it started to undermine the soil directly underneath the cement emergency spillway. And that is why they're very, very concerned. And right now they're trying to fill up that gouge with more rocks to try and stabilize it, but the water is still going to go right through those rocks if it comes on over. We've got to take a break for station identification. When we come on back, more about Oroville, and we got a caller waiting on the line. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the Oroville Dam. We're talking about its primary point of weakness, which is that concrete emergency spillway, which has never been used before this flood in the history of the Oroville Dam. And it was being used because the primary spillway, the one that's lined with concrete, has been seriously damaged by the huge volume of water that's pouring on through. The water is now spilling out of that spillway before it gets down to the Feather River, and it's just gouging out huge amounts of soil underneath. And they're kind of between a rock and a hard place, literally, because the more they use that primary spillway, the more that structure is being undermined by the water, and the more the eventual total of damage will be. Now, as we mentioned in the end of the last hour, the problem with the emergency spillway is the spillway itself is cement, but it rests on an earthen dam, which, as the water was pouring over the emergency spillway, and it was roiling there at the bottom, began to undermine the earth directly underneath that emergency spillway. They're trying to fill it with rocks, but that's not going to stop the water from further eroding that structure should that water come over the top of that emergency spillway again. That's one major area of concern. The second one is that all of this debris that is being washed down from both the primary and the emergency spillways is collecting down there at the bottom where those spillways run off into the Feather River, and it's forming an obstruction, a huge amount of debris that is causing the water to actually back up towards the dam itself. And apparently the power station is now experiencing flooding. And if the power station goes offline, that's going to be a serious issue there. And basically it means that the flow of water coming down the spillways from the generators is also being reduced by that back pressure. This is not good. And of course the fingers are already pointing, and the CYA is in full display because apparently environmentalists some 12 years ago, following a heavy earthquake in the region, had said, we're not sure this thing is still safe. And the state of California said, yeah, we'll just go with it. All right, let's take a phone call. Francis in Vancouver. Wait a minute. Before I take that, though, we just got word the White House did approve California Governor Jerry Brown's request for emergency funding, and I'll bet all that talk about secession is now going to go out the window. Okay, phone call. Francis in Vancouver. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I was going to talk about General Flynn, but since Oroville's on the agenda, I just wanted to say when this whole thing started about a week ago, I was looking at this video and there was a map shown and the consequences of dam failure, which is about a 50 to 100-foot wall of water, or actually more, maybe 200-foot wall of water coming down that valley. And it's not just the immediate area. There's actually two valleys that branches off, yes. And one runs down through Sacramento, and the other one runs all the way, like a huge distance, all the way east of Los Angeles. And like this is like the most important farming land in the U.S. for vegetables and fruits.
Yeah, and that Feather River is the water supply as well, and not just for the agriculture, but for drinking water in Los Angeles. Now, the numbers I'm looking at are saying it is a maximum of a 100-foot wall of water if the main part of the dam collapses catastrophically, but that's not what we're looking at. What they're most concerned about is that emergency spillway failing, that would produce a huge release of water, but we wouldn't see a huge wall of water, but it would still be a large amount of flooding.
Yeah, you see, underneath that parking lot on the far left side, there's actually water gushing up from under that. And from what I've seen, it's like that whole berm wasn't really meant to be a storage dam. It was meant to be a flood control dam. And so it's not meant to hold water right up to the top. And all that ground, especially over the side towards the parking lot there on the left, that's all getting saturated. That whole hillside could come away, and then there'd be like about a 30, 40-foot wall of water.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is, if it does come down that valley, what is the loss going to be in agricultural production? I mean, we're looking, is it going to be $500 billion, $1 trillion worth of agricultural production in California's Central Valley?
Yeah, there is absolutely no question that is going to be an epic disaster, and it's going to have impact, as one of the other callers said. We're looking at companies that sell flood insurance being driven out of business. We're looking at the loss of the electricity from the Oroville power station. We're looking at major damage to Oroville and some of the other towns in the area. The contamination of the freshwater supply going into Los Angeles County. The loss of the agricultural land. It's going to be huge. It'll be like at least a year before they start getting plants growing on that ground again.
Can I say something about General Flynn, or do you want to stay on this topic?
No, go ahead. I'm done with Oroville. Go ahead and talk about General Flynn.
Okay. Well, here's a guy who's a U.S. Army general. He's a former head of the DIA. He's the president-elect's chosen national security advisor. And he gets his line tapped by the CIA or NSA or whoever.
FBI.
And there's no warrant. Yeah, there's no warrant or secret or overt. There's just no warrant. And so if somebody at that level is getting their lines tapped, that means everybody's getting their lines tapped. And these people in the intelligence community are anarchic and lawless.
Yes.
And I want to relate this and put it in context. Like, this is nothing new, but this is the worst I've ever seen it. And it's a really good book by Colonel Fletcher Prouty called The Secret Team.
Yes.
And anybody who listens to your program has got to read that book if they already haven't. And he goes into the U-2 affair and Francis Gary Powers. And Eisenhower wanted to create peace with the Russia again. No, you're not allowed to have peace with the Russians, right?
Yeah, it cuts into the profits of the bomb makers.
Yeah, and so Eisenhower was going to have a summit, Paris summit, with Khrushchev to put an end to the Cold War. So the Dulles brothers, who are tied in with Wall Street and the CIA, they sent a U-2 mission into Russia, but they only gave it half the fuel that it needed, and it used a hydrogen peroxide fuel that was very specialized. So it's basically, as Colonel Prouty puts it, it's physically impossible for a U-2 mission to take place with only half the fuel necessary for the mission.
Well, hang on. He's drastically oversimplifying, because the U-2 had hydrogen peroxide for attitude control jets, because at the altitude it flew at, the normal control services weren't all that effective. The U-2 had a turbofan engine, and it had enough fuel for that engine for the flight, because Francis Gary Power had a fuel gauge on the control panel. But there was an additive that had to go into the fuel to allow it to work at the ultra-high altitude, but it was a very small amount of additive, and it did not have its own separate gauge, and that was the one that was basically only had half a tank in there. So the engine flamed out, and Francis Gary Powers had to try and come on down to windmill start the engine and get it going again, and that's when they got him. It was a setup to destroy that summit between Kennedy and Khrushchev.
That's right, and what the point that Colonel Prouty makes is, here's General Eisenhower, and General Eisenhower is one of those characters. He's right up there with George Washington. He's one of the most prestigious. He didn't always have do everything right, but he was just a really prestigious character, right?
Yes.
He's one of the most sort of noble, he's probably the best president in our lifetimes.
Yes.
And according to Colonel Prouty, General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, became so despondent after that he actually wanted to resign.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible, and that's sort of where now we're right back at this. It's the same, scurvy crew, and They want to drive out Trump, and it's making me sick. I've never seen this kind of level of hatred for a new president. Like, even Nixon didn't get it, It's this bad.
No, I agree with you. I was saying earlier in the show, there has never been a time in the history of the United States of America when the entrenched political establishment was so openly in mutiny against the elected president of the United States.
And I just want to add one last thing, not to be a bore, but that scumbag, William Crystal, came out this week. And it's up on the Daily Caller. And he's saying that the American people are lazy and they need to be replaced. And who is William Crystal? He's the son of Irving Kristol. And who's Irving Kristol? He's the right-hand man of Leon Trotsky in exile. Leon Trotsky, who created the Red Army and who was instrumental in the extermination of 65 million Russians, mostly Christians. And this is the scum now that's putting this pressure on. This isn't just an attack on Trump. This is an attack on all the people who voted for Trump.
Well, where does William Crystal think all these middle-class Americans are going to go? Are they going to sell us to Mexico or something? And the idea, I guess so. But I mean, it is a very dangerous situation here, where you're talking about exterminating the most ambitious, creative, and industrious segment of your society, so that you can have a society based on the most obedient workers, which is what they're talking about.
Slavery.
Yes.
That's what they want, and this is. And
they want feudalism.
They want a civil war.
They want to
return. It looks to me like they want a civil war.
They want to return to feudalism, where we're not allowed. The ordinary people are not allowed to do anything without the blessings of the nobility, and that's what that cashless society is all about. Because once you're dependent on that piece of plastic to do what you're doing in life, the banks are going to tie in with your insurance companies. You're going to go to the bake shop and say, "I want a donut." And you're going to run the card, and the computer's going to come on back and say, well, your health insurance company says you've had too many sweets this month, so you're not allowed to have the donut. And, I mean, that's how easily it could go out of control, because certainly the computer technology is already there.
Yeah. Okay, well, Mike, thanks for your show. It takes a lot of courage to run, stick yourself up in public like this, and I'm grateful to you for doing it.
All right, well,
have a good day.
Same to you. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a slightly belated shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And one more time for this show, if you have any factual information about Snapchat and its facial recognition feature and what it is being used for, please email me today. Please don't just send me speculations and guesswork and wild suppositions and things. I'm interested in documentable facts about the Snapchat, facial recognition, and what they're using it for, and please email me today. And that's the last time I'll mention that for the show. Now then, as you know, earlier today, Robert De Niro and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had a press conference expressing their concern with the dangers of mercury. Now, Robert De Niro is out there trying to make the point he is not anti-vaccine, but he's saying there is clearly an issue with the presence of mercury, a known neurotoxin, far more toxic than lead, still being allowed in vaccines. And I have to admit, I'm scratching my head. Knowing how dangerous and damaging this is, why do pharmaceutical corporations insist on continuing to put mercury in medicines, knowing it's neurotoxic? Now, of course, De Niro is involved because his son Elliot is autistic, and De Niro is citing all these studies that link mercury in vaccines to autism, and there are a number of them. And already the corporate media is out there saying, oh, their views are dangerous. It's dangerous for them to be talking about mercury in vaccines. That's dangerous. They can't be doing it. And again, they're making a point of saying they're not being anti-vaccine in general. They're just pointing to one specific aspect that needs to be addressed. And I think from the point of view of the pharmaceutical corporations, their fear is that if it were ever documented that they knew mercury in vaccines was causing autism, and remember, there are now vaccines whose product safety inserts admit the vaccines cause autism. the civil litigation would drive them out of business. I'm sure that they would ask for more indemnification and bailouts from the U.S. government because that's how business works under fascism here. But what Robert De Niro and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have done is they've issued a challenge. Knowing that the CDC's report that claimed to prove there was no link between vaccines and autism was a fraud, as admitted to by one of that report's own authors, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., working together with the World Mercury Project, has issued a $100,000 challenge. And basically, they're saying that anybody who can come up with a peer-reviewed scientific study demonstrating that thimerosal is safe in the amounts contained in vaccines currently being administered to American children and pregnant women, that's it. If you can find a peer-reviewed scientific study that says all of these vaccines with their trace amounts of mercury are perfectly okay for American children and pregnant women, you will get $100,000. He's crowdsourcing the research project, is what he's doing. And their money is safe, because every report that claimed there was no link has been discredited. And Robert F. Kennedy came on out with a very cogent observation. On one hand, you have the U.S. government telling pregnant women they should avoid eating fish that are contaminated with mercury so that it doesn't harm their fetuses. But then on the other hand, the CDC is injecting mercury-containing vaccines into pregnant women, infants, and children. And it defies logic and common sense. Why is mercury in fish dangerous and mercury in these vaccines safe? It just does not make any sense. Now, there's been another one of these pharmaceutical companies that has cranked up the price on their medication, and the drug deflazacort has been available to patients suffering from Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and it has basically been costing about $1,200 per year on average, and they just jacked the price up to $89,000. $89,000. It is a racket. It's all about the money. The vaccine industry is cranking out $30 billion in sales every year. The CDC itself has over 20 vaccine patents. They're making $4.5 billion every year from vaccines. Do you really think they're going to be impartial and objective about the safety of their products? Of course not. They have a clear monetary conflict of interest. All right. Now then, apparently down in Mexico, they've had another one of these embarrassing little incidents where a container of radioactive material has been stolen, and Mexico has announced an alert. And this is hardly the first case. Radioactive materials were stolen. Cobalt-60 isotope, which is dangerous, was stolen in April 2013. In 2014, 2015, and just last year, criminals were stealing iridium isotopes in 3 separate cases. Now, they were able to recover all of these isotopes. And people are wondering just why these thieves were stealing these materials. Well, I can imagine there's a black market. These are medical isotopes, by the way. These are not weapons. But you do have to be careful with them. One of the world's worst small-scale radiation releases it was down in South America someplace, and I forget offhand where it was. Somebody had thrown out a cancer radiotherapy machine without properly disposing of the radioisotope itself. They just threw it in a junkyard. And some people who were scavenging from the junkyard saw the machine, broke it open, and took the canister home. And they thought it was really cool. In the dark, the material glowed blue. And you had people painting it on themselves and thinking, oh, this is cool. This is even better than makeup. And, of course, they became horribly, horribly ill. Do you remember radium watch dials? If you're my age, you probably do. and that was cool. That was a status symbol. I've got a radium watch dial. And there was another horrible incident where the women who were working in the well, I got to take a break for commercials. I'm going to tell you the story when we come on back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, some decades ago, 40, 50 years ago, it was a status symbol to have a radium dial on your watch. And the advantage of it was if you had a watch that would glow in the dark, this being before the days of digital watches and luminescent panels, most such watches, you had to have them in the light for a while, and then they would glow for maybe an hour or two in the dark. The advantage of a radium watch dial was the glowing was constant and would keep on going. So far, so good. And the radium watch dials were produced in a factory, and the workers were not told the nature of the paint that they were screening onto the front faces of these watches. And apparently some of the women who knew that the stuff glowed in the dark thought it was really kind of cool, and they took some home, and they used it as nail polish when they were going to go out at night. And that had some disastrous occurrences. And it's a lack of education and awareness. And partly it was because following the end of World War II, the U.S. government was trying to convince everybody that it was okay to have nuclear bombs around. They had the Atoms for Peace program. And a lot of this information was not made public. I remember when I was a kid, my father was really big into stereo. Stereo was brand new. Disney had just invented it for Fantasia. And my father had this big stereo system that he'd put together. And this was in the days where the phono pickups were very sensitive to static electricity that built up on the surface of the record. And so he had this static electricity remover, which was this little handle with a brush on the end, and inside the brush was a strip of radioactive polonium. Because if you've ever worked with early radiation experiments, radioactive particles will eliminate a static charge. And this thing was just out there, radiating away. Anyway. We've got a couple of phone calls. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Al. Sorry. Hi, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. Earlier you were talking about vaccinations and thimerosal, formaldehyde, aluminum salts, whatever else.
Yes.
Up in Canada, apparently there hasn't been any thimerosal used in vaccinations since the late 90s, early 2000s. And aluminum salts apparently are still used as adjuvants, and, of course, peanut oil and blah, 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 blah. Another problem that we have in common is the influenza shot. It still contains thimerosal, and I'm going to send you this website when your website's up and running again.
It's up and running at the moment. I know we've been hit with a couple of hack attacks, but it's running right now.
Okay, I tried to log in about a minute ago. Anyway, I told you this before. The day I had a vaccination when I was 3 years old, my mother was giving me a bath and I went into convulsions. And if it weren't for the fact that I was in bath water, I would have had brain damage because, when you go into convulsions, your brain actually overheats.
Yes.
And it wasn't until years and years later that I had a similar kind of reaction to hay fever shot that my doctor told me that these intermuscular vaccination shots, if they do hit a vein, and they sometimes do,
yes,
that stuff's going right in your bloodstream.
Yes.
So, any shot that a person has, there are always risks. It doesn't matter what it is. There's always a risk.
Yeah, but from the point of view of the companies making this stuff, they don't really care. They're in the United States. They're legally protected from civil litigation by the Homeland Security Act. Any penalties that are being paid, any settlements for vaccine damage are paid for by the American taxpayers. They have absolutely zero incentive to change the way they're doing business because they're all getting insanely rich off of this. And these are people who don't really care about health. They care about profits. And that's why Robert De Niro and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the producers of Vax, where did I put that? The producers of Vax are considered the enemy. Anyway, listen, do you have more, Al?
Just a little bit.
All right, I'm going to hold you over the commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking with Al in Canada. And Al, you had another point you wanted to make.
Yeah, something, on a similar note, obviously the mercury is still involved in the influenza, if you want to call them vaccinations up here in Canada. But if there was no link to autism or anything like that, by using mercury-based thimerosal, why would it be taken out of Canada's vaccinations, in the late 90s and not even being touched in the United States?
Well, actually, thimerosal was banned for use in vaccines all the way back in 1999, but it's never been enforced. And I think the concern is that if it was ever documented or proven to the American people that this thimerosal was causing autism, the civil litigation would drive the vaccine companies completely out of business. And I think that's why there's this full court press for mandatory vaccinations in every state, removing the religious exemptions, so that there isn't a population of non-vaccinated children with which one can do comparisons, although somebody actually did a study involving homeschool children who had not been vaccinated and found out that the unvaccinated children were overall much healthier than the vaccinated ones.
I did not know that, Mike.
Yes.
I had no idea that they should have been removed. We have in Canada, we have a very large Amish community.
Yes.
And they're spaced, all across Canada, but not far from where I live, just a little north of London. That's not London, England, by the way, folks. London, Ontario. And of course, they homeschool and all of it, right?
Yeah, and they don't do vaccinations, and they don't get autism.
No, and there's no autism.
Yeah, there's none at all. Interestingly enough, a few years ago, there was one Amish child here in the United States who came down with autism, and of course, the pro-vaxxer said, see, even without the vaccines, he's getting autism. And it turned out this particular child had been adopted by an Amish family, and prior to his adoption had been given the mandatory vaccines.
Yeah, I've heard you tell that one before, and you have to laugh. And for, people that don't really understand who the Amish are, they're very self-reliant people. Oh, yes. They're libertarian to the extreme. And,
from my point of view, they're very admirable. They're very admirable. Of course, I grew up in New England farming country, which, while it wasn't Amish, it shared a lot of the same values and cultural traditions. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think they're very admirable people. And certainly their rejection of dressing up and pretense and vanity and everything, I think is actually very, very good. I mean, I don't think I could live among the Amish. I'd be dead of boredom inside of 4 months, but I certainly do admire them.
Mike, they are some of the best craftsmen.
Oh, yeah.
The country has to offer as far as furniture.
No question they are.
I bought some.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you're looking for solid wood furniture that's going to turn into an heirloom,
yes,
those are the people to go to. Anyway,
my grandfather did that. My grandfather, the one who used to get drunk with Richard Nixon, he owned his own water wheel driven wood shop. It's still there. It's still there in Concord, New Hampshire, East Concord, New Hampshire, and it's still there. And wow. he made furniture, some of which has wound up in museums.
Talent runs in your family, Mike.
That's pushing it a little bit.
I don't know. It's something I've noticed as working as a millwright. And I'm not saying this because, of anything. But, my background's German, and a lot of German people are millwrights.
Yes.
They are. I don't know what it is. It's like that old, the Scotsman. They're stationary engineers, right?
Yes.
On ships and whatnot, like Star Trek. Anyway, I appreciate your time.
That was Roddenberry did that specifically because of the long tradition of Scotsmen being engineers on ships, and he figured, we're not going to break with tradition here, and that's where that came from. But I grew up in a culture, and I grew up in an age in which what you could make for yourself was your personal statement and who you were, as opposed to the consumer culture we are now submerged in, where your whole identity is what you can afford to buy and put on display on your body. And I think the former is really, you get a much stronger sense of identity from being able to take wood and steel and brass and actually physically make something that does something. And maybe it's not as wonderful as what comes out of the factories, but at least you know it's yours. I think that's something that's sadly missing in our culture today. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. We got a bunch of callers waiting on the line here. Thank you. We're going to switch over to Linda in Foxborough, Massachusetts. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, quick, Mike, I want to say thank you. You have such a great show.
Thank you.
That guy was good, too, talking about the Amish and the vaccines. I want to go back to Sean Spicer from earlier in the show.
Yes.
And, yeah, so did you get to hear the press briefing on Valentine's Day?
No, I did not. I'm unfortunately not catching quite as many of the actual briefings as I should. I usually get tape snippets after the fact here, but please enlighten us.
Well, when I looked it up just to see the video, I ended up getting the White House just by putting in, press briefing, Sean Spicer, and the date, which is the 14th. And can I read 2 sentences out of it to you?
Sure.
Okay. So this is I'll just give a brief. He goes on and repeats multiple times that no crimes were committed by Flynn and that it was a trust issue. And I think the media has reiterated that.
No, they haven't. No, they haven't. A lot of the media is still trying to claim that it was a violation of the Logan Act, even though the FBI and Department of Justice are saying, no, it was not. And it was yeah. Okay, go ahead.
And Sean goes over that. He says this is part of their responsibility as they're speaking to their peers in other departments in other countries. So that's on that. But this part was very disappointing. He says he speaks about the trust issue, and then he says that's why the president decided to ask for his resignation, and he got it. The irony of this entire situation is that the president has been incredibly tough on Russia. He continues to raise the issue of Crimea, which the previous administration had allowed to be seized by Russia.
What?
His ambassador.
You're quoting from Spicer here.
Correct.
Yes.
His ambassador to the United States, Nikki Haley, stood before the UN Security Council on her first day and strongly denounced the Russian occupation of Crimea. As Ambassador Haley said at the time, the dire situation in eastern Ukraine is one that demands a clear and strong condemnation of Russia's actions. And then this is the kicker. President Trump has made it very clear that he expects the Russian government to de-escalate violence in the Ukraine and return Crimea.
Yeah, we did talk about this. We did talk about this yesterday, and it sounds very alarming. But again, I'm taking a cautious approach here because again, Trump is still trying to convince the war hawks in the Senate he is on their side until he can get all of his confirmations done, especially the Supreme Court justice. Once those confirmations are over, once those confirmations are over, if Trump continues on the same path, then we know we're heading into a world war. If after the confirmation of the Supreme Court justice, Trump starts showing a change of direction, then we're going to know that he's been playing the Congress all along with this tough talk.
Thanks, Michael. That's what I needed to hear that. I appreciate it. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Alex in San Antonio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling because I was listening to some of the callers about what they thought regarding the Michael Flynn situation, and I wanted to know if this wasn't just something that happened because Trump, not being a normal politician, just doesn't have the clout that other politicians have, where maybe perhaps because Obama had provoked a Russian response by positioning troops over in Lithuania and Estonia. I thought maybe perhaps Michael Flynn did speak to some Russian officials so that those back channels that we always talk about could stay open. And, you know, maybe some official decisions weren't made, but definitely some things were talked about. And it created a situation where it would legally give teeth to anybody who was trying to oppose the Trump administration to go ahead and go forward with some charges. And I guess that's why,
again, the charge that Michael Flynn was in violation of the Logan Act doesn't stand up. Michael Flynn was part of the transition team. During the transition is when you start establishing those chains of communication. And it's hardly the first time that members of a transition team are starting to establish those lines of communication. It's just the corporate media seized on this on the basis of this phone call. And I have to be very honest, I think Trump should have stood firm on this. But again, I think he's surrounded by people who have infiltrated his White House, and they're feeding him bad information in order to lead him into these big bear traps, and Trump just stepped into one. And there's nothing we can do about that right now, except hope that Donald Trump is going to realize that some of the people that he thought he could trust because they're working for him are in fact not trustworthy at all, and are actually working for outside interests. No, and like I said, once he gets his Supreme Court judge confirmed, I think that's when we're going to see this high-level shakeup at the White House, including the Chief of Staff.
That's exactly what I agree with you, Mike. On I think that you're spot on when you said that the people that he's brought on, he looks at it from a business standpoint, and he doesn't think that those people would ever undermine the business they're working for.
Yeah.
However, politics just doesn't work that way. Freedom.
He's got to learn fast. He's got to learn fast, right, because they're already trying to set him up for a fail. And
absolutely. Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome, Alex. We're going to thank you. We're going to let you go here. Yeah, that's the reality. See, Trump is coming out of a place of doing things businesslike, and knowing that there is a common agenda of everybody getting richer together, because all of those high-level executives, they have stock option plans or profit sharing and the rest of it, and they're all working toward that common goal. Washington, D.C. is very different. Everybody's got overlapping agendas, and they're all the hidden alliances are spread all over the place like a giant Gordian knot. And I think at some point Trump is going to have to realize that Alexander the Great had the right solution to deal with that. All right, let's take a phone call. Bill in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. A couple fast questions. I think Trump should fire everybody and just hire people who donated to his campaign. My first thing.
That's addressed. Well, first of all, a lot of the people who donated to his campaign, I'm not sure I want in the White House, like Sheldon Adelson. But I think what Donald Trump needs to do is to find people who are knowledgeable about what's really going on around the world, who are not beholding to some of these power players, and he needs to start bringing them in. And again, the idea of the kitchen cabinet is he can put together a group of advisors not subject to control by the Congress or even by other members of the White House staff. And I think he needs to start developing that Merlin-esque outside line of communication.
I agree. I guess I should have said he should interview him first before he hires him. So, but yeah. So, let me just talk real fast on voting. I agree with you on everything about we should go back to paper ballots. The thing I like your opinion on the Electoral College. Everything's on the states. You know, every state. I'm in Pennsylvania, so we get 22 votes and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking that we have like 3,100 counties in the United States. How about just every county gets one vote, and whoever wins the most counties is the president? What do you think of that idea?
Let's see. I would have to take a look at that. Basically what I'd have to do is spreadsheet it out. But the reason for the Electoral College is you need to remember when that was all being set up. We were not really functioning as a single nation under a single central tyrannical government. We were a coalition of separate states. Basically, the governors of the states were, in effect, the chief executive of their own little country, and they were all aligned together, and the federal government was just arbitrating things, and the Electoral College was set up to provide a balance between the popular vote, where obviously the most populous states would have an advantage, and yet preserving an equality of input for the individual separate states themselves. That's the same mechanism between the separation of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives is based on population. The Senate is based on the states, to try and balance the needs between the two. Our present government, though, doesn't really see the states as having or deserving any kind of independence or autonomy, and that's why there's this push now to go to a complete popular vote. But again, Trump won by the rules everybody agreed to play by going into that election. If this had been a popular vote campaign, Trump would have ignored the smaller states and focused all of his efforts on just 4 states, and he still would have won. And by the way, it is now pretty obvious at this point, Hillary Clinton did not win the popular vote, despite what the corporate media tells you. Once you subtract out all of these illegal voters, that lady who's getting deported went to the case. She voted 5 times. And her defense was she was told it was okay for illegals to vote multiple times, which is utter nonsense, except that, yeah, they were being encouraged to do this. And that's why one of my big pushes for the next 2 years, we have got to demand a complete clean-out of our election system. And Donald Trump's going to be on our side on this, because if we don't get this thing fixed, he's going to be facing the same election fraud 4 years from now.
Right, and I agree with you, but that's what I was saying, that, you know, instead of the popular vote, do the county thing, because that'll be a representation of the entire country. Every county, one vote, and anyway, that's my opinion.
Well, again, hang on a second, and we're coming up on a commercial break here. The problem with that is that all the counties do not have equal populations. And you have some counties like Los Angeles County has got enough of a population to qualify as a state all by itself. And so again, it's a complex issue. And but until we argue about how the elections are to be counted and weighted, we need to guarantee the elections are honest. We don't have that right now. And until we get that, we do not have control over our country. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here, and we've got a couple more phone calls to get through. Robert in Louisiana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Robert, are you there? Going once?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Okay, what's on your mind?
Well, I just want to make a quick statement about this travel ban.
Yes?
Wouldn't it be simpler for all the people who are protesting? Wouldn't it be much simpler if they protested against the United States government for bombing these people's country, which is the reason why they're leaving in the first place?
Well, also, absolutely. You're absolutely correct there. Now, that's not going to address the issue of the illegal immigrants coming up from Mexico and Central America. But you're absolutely right. Everybody's screaming that we should allow the refugees in, you know, that we're somehow being unfair. Why not end the wars that made them refugees to begin with?
Exactly. And also, I've noticed that the majority of the people who are protesting under these Soros-funded protests basically didn't want anything to do with Muslims before this happened. And those same people, 9 times out of 10, are Christians who, once these people get here from the Muslim countries, will be the first one to tell them that they're going to hell because they don't believe the same religious beliefs that they have. So I'm finding a lot of double standards here.
Well, you know, if the liberals didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all.
Well, that's basically all I wanted to say, Mike, and I enjoy your show, man. You be blessed now.
Thank you very much, Robert. We're going to switch over to Phyllis in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, it's about these vaccinations and this autism. It looks like it'll take us over, and that'll be the end of us, the Americans that own the country. It's past the time of conversation, I would think.
Well, again, there is this question in the back of my head. These pharmaceutical companies know the mercury is harmful. The FDA prohibited it back in 1999, I think it was. Why are they still putting it in there? Is there something going on besides the fact that it's a preservative and it's reducing economic loss? Or are they afraid to take the thimerosal out, all of a sudden see a drop in autism rates, which would telegraph to everybody that that had been the cause all along? But there is an issue here, and Robert De Niro is right to be dealing with it. So is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It must be scary for young people growing up in a country, knowing they live in a country where to the government and the corporations, they're just a herd of livestock to be harvested from. And that's all they are to these corporations, the corporate and political leaders. They don't see us as human beings deserving of respect and dignity. They see us as farm animals, and their only concern is maximizing the profit from the herd.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. It's time to quit talking about it. Just do something about it.
All righty.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the lines here because we've only got another minute before the end of the show. And over in Iceland, there's a lot of seismic activity going on. And according to geophysicist Paul Einarsson, 4 of Iceland's volcanoes are showing activity. We could see multiple eruptions, and that would be a real headache for everybody, not just in Iceland, but all over Europe. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical. Share what you know with everybody that you know. Have a good evening, and aloha, America.